Hello there. Welcome. Go ahead and get comfortable. Settle in and allow your mind to drift back through the ages. We often think of ancient history as this single, distant block of time. But the past is far deeper and more stretched out than we can easily imagine. For instance, Cleopatra lived closer in time to the moon landing than she did to the building of the Great Pyramids, which were ancient even to her. Tonight, we'll journey through 10,000 years of forgotten history, not as a lesson to be studied, but as a gentle current to carry you off to sleep. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to remember. Just relax and let these quiet whispers of the past guide you into a deep and restful sleep. If you enjoy these journeys into the past, a gentle tap on the subscribe button helps others find this calm space too. Now, let your thoughts begin to soften. Let the world outside fade away. Section 1. The immense chasm of time. Our minds really struggle to grasp the true scale of history. We see the Colosseum and the pyramids and think of them as part of the same ancient world, but thousands of years stand between them. Let's begin our journey by just wading into this vast ocean of time. That fact about Cleopatra is the perfect place to start. The last pharaoh of Egypt, Queen Cleopatra VII, died in the year 30 BCE. The first moon landing was in 1969. That's a gap of just under 2,000 years. But the Great Pyramid of Giza was completed around 2560 BCE. This means that when Cleopatra gazed upon the pyramids, she was looking at monuments that were already 2.5 millennia old. To her, they were as ancient, as mysterious, and as distant as her own world is to us today. To put it another way, the opening of the first Pizza Hut in 1958 is closer to Cleopatra's lifetime than her lifetime was to the construction of the pyramids. But the pyramids themselves weren't built in a vacuum. As those great stones were being hauled into place in Egypt, a completely different drama was playing out far to the north. On a remote, frozen island in the Arctic Ocean, the very last woolly mammoths were still alive. A small, isolated population survived on what is now Wrangel Island until about 4,000 years ago, nearly 1,000 years after the Great Pyramid was finished. The pharaohs of Egypt could have, in theory, known about these creatures. While one civilization was reaching for eternity with stone, a species from the Ice Age was quietly taking its final steps. Let's drift even further back, before the pyramids, before the first king of Egypt, before writing itself. In what is now southeastern Turkey, there's a place called Göbekli Tepe. It's a complex of massive, T-shaped stone pillars, weighing up to 50 tons each, arranged in large circles. They're covered in intricate carvings of animals, foxes, boars, snakes, and birds. What's truly staggering is its age. Built beginning around 9600 BCE, Göbekli Tepe is over 11,500 years old. This single place has rewritten our understanding of the ancient world. It's about 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. It predates the invention of pottery, the wheel, and widespread agriculture. It was built by people who we long believed were simple hunter-gatherers. For a long time, historians thought that complex religion and monumental architecture came after humanity settled down to farm. But Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite. It suggests the drive to come together for ritual, to build something grand and meaningful, may have been the very thing that encouraged people to settle down in the first place. These people, living at the end of the last ice age, somehow organized themselves to quarry, transport, and carve these enormous stones, creating the world's first known temple. The layers of history are so deep. We stand at the very top, looking down through a hazy filter. The time that passed between the building of Göbekli Tepe and the first cities of Sumer is longer than the time that has passed from those Sumerian cities to us today. Let your mind float on that thought. The immense, silent, patient passage of years, each one a grain of sand piling up into dunes, then into mountains, a landscape of forgotten time. Section 2. Whispers from the Nile. Let's drift now to the banks of the Nile, to the land of the pharaohs. Not the Egypt of Cleopatra, the Hellenistic queen, but the older kingdom that built the pyramids. Here, life was governed by the rhythm of the great river. Its annual flood brought fertile black silt, the basis of all life and wealth. The Egyptians were keen observers of their world. They developed one of the first 365-day calendars, a necessity for predicting the flood and planning their harvests. Their year had 3 seasons of 4 months each, and each month had 3 10-day weeks. The 5 leftover days were for holy celebrations. Sleep, for the ancient Egyptians, wasn't just rest. It was a doorway to another world, a state where they could receive messages from the gods. Dreams were taken very seriously as omens and prophecies. While the idea of sleep temples is more famously connected with the later Greeks and Romans, there's evidence that Egyptians sought out healing through divinely inspired dreams in sacred places. They would perform rituals, then sleep within a temple precinct, hoping a god would appear in their slumber with a cure or guidance. The boundary between waking and dreaming was thin and porous. When they prepared for sleep, the wealthy might rest their heads not on soft pillows, but on carved headrests of wood, ivory, or stone. These might seem uncomfortable to us, but they kept the head elevated and cool in the hot climate, while also protecting elaborate hairstyles. Their understanding of the body was a mix of sharp observation and spiritual belief. When it came to mummification, they demonstrated a sophisticated, if selective, knowledge of anatomy. In the classic New Kingdom method, embalmers would remove the internal organs, lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines through a small incision. Each was preserved in its own sacred canopic jar. The heart, however, was always left in the body. They believed the heart was the center of intelligence and emotion, the seat of the soul, and it would be needed for judgment in the afterlife. The brain, on the other hand, was considered entirely useless. It was typically scrambled with a long hook inserted through the nose, liquefied, and then drained out and discarded. Daily life was full of details that feel both foreign and familiar. Men and women of the upper classes famously wore elaborate eye makeup. The black kohl and green eyeshadow weren't just for beauty. They believed the makeup had magical healing properties and offered protection from the sun's glare and from flies. And modern science has shown that the lead-based makeup they used may have indeed had antibacterial properties. Hieroglyphics, with their beautiful symbols, are what we associate most with ancient Egypt, but they were incredibly slow to write. For this reason, they were saved for important inscriptions on tombs and temples. For everyday writing, letters, records, and notes, scribes used a simplified, cursive script called hieratic, which was much faster to write on papyrus. And what about the people who built the great monuments? For centuries, the popular image, fed by Hollywood, was of massive armies of slaves toiling under the whip. But archaeological evidence from the workers' village near Giza paints a very different picture. The pyramids were built not by slaves, but by a paid workforce of skilled Egyptian laborers. It was likely a form of national service, but they were organized, well-fed, and given proper medical care. They lived in a planned community, and their graves show they were buried with honor. They were citizens contributing to a national project, a sacred duty to ensure the eternal life of their king. They were even paid in the most stable currency of the time, bread and beer. Let your mind rest on this image, not of suffering, but of purpose, of thousands of people working together under the hot sun, their lives intertwined with the rising of the sun, the flooding of the Nile, and the building of a stairway to the heavens. Section 3. Echoes from the land between the rivers. Now, we let the gentle current of our journey carry us away from the Nile, eastward, to the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This is Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, home to the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians. It is here, in the ancient Sumerian cities like Uruk and Ur, that history as we know it truly begins. Around the late 4th millennium BCE, the Sumerians developed one of the first systems of writing. It started as simple pictures, but evolved into a complex script of wedge-shaped marks pressed into wet clay tablets. We call it cuneiform, and it was invented not for poetry or for kings to boast of their victories, but for a much more practical reason: accounting. The earliest written documents we have are records of grain, livestock, and trade. History begins with a receipt. From these clay tablets, a forgotten world emerges. We have found the world's oldest known lullaby, written in Sumerian, a gentle song to soothe a child to sleep thousands of years ago. We have also found what might be the world's oldest recorded joke, a Sumerian proverb from around 1900 BCE that says, "Something which has never occurred since time immemorial. A young woman did not fart in her husband's lap." The humor may be a bit lost in translation, but the humanity is not. It was the Babylonians who came after the Sumerians, who became the great observers of the night sky. They were meticulous astronomers, believing the movements of the planets and stars were messages from the gods. On thousands of clay tablets, they kept detailed astronomical diaries, tracking the paths of Venus, the phases of the moon, and the appearance of comets. Their records were so detailed and spanned so many centuries that they were able to discover repeating patterns. They identified the Saros cycle, a period of about 18 years that allowed them to predict lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy. Their legacy is written into the way we measure our own days. The Babylonians used a base 60 mathematical system. It's from them that we inherit the division of a circle into 360 degrees, an hour into 60 minutes, and a minute into 60 seconds. Every time you look at a clock, you are seeing a faint echo of ancient Babylon. They also gave us the zodiac, dividing the path of the sun through the sky into 12 segments, each associated with a constellation. The law, too, was codified here. The famous Code of Hammurabi, from around 1754 BCE, isn't the oldest law code, but it is one of the most complete. Carved onto a tall black stone pillar, it details laws for commerce, family, and crime, famously establishing the principle of an eye for an eye. It reveals a complex society concerned with justice and social order. And even in this world of gods and kings, some things were just normal. We have found a clay tablet from around 1750 BCE, which is the world's first known customer complaint. A man named Nani wrote to a merchant named Ea Nasir, complaining in great detail about the poor quality of copper he had been sold and the rude treatment he received from the merchant's messenger. It's a powerful reminder that for all the vast differences in time and technology, some things never change. Relax into that thought, the shared human experience, the need to record, to measure, to understand, the desire for justice, the frustration with bad service, the love that inspires a lullaby, all captured in wedge-shaped marks on fragile tablets of clay. Section 4. The Greek Dawn. Let our journey drift westward now, across the sea to the rocky shores and sun-drenched islands of Greece. Here, a different kind of world was taking shape, one founded on questions, on logic, and on the power of the individual mind. The Greeks inherited much from the civilizations that came before them. They took Egyptian geometry, a practical tool for measuring land, and turned it into a theoretical science of abstract proofs. They took the Babylonian star charts and began to ask not just what the stars did, but why. The philosopher Aristotle made powerful arguments that the earth was a globe, and other thinkers, like Aristarchus of Samos, even put forward the incredible idea that the earth revolved around the sun, a concept that would be lost and then rediscovered centuries later. This spirit of inquiry gave birth to philosophy, the love of wisdom. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle began to explore profound questions of ethics, logic, and the nature of reality, laying the foundations for all of Western thought that followed. The Greeks also celebrated the human form and human potential. This is most famously expressed in the Olympic Games, which began in 776 BCE as a religious festival to honor Zeus. Athletes from across the Greek-speaking world would gather to compete in running, wrestling, and chariot racing. They competed not for gold medals, but for the honor of a simple olive wreath. And they competed, famously, in the nude, a practice that celebrated the beauty and strength of the perfected male body. Daily life had its own distinct customs. At a symposium, a drinking party for elite men, they wouldn't sit at a table. Instead, they would recline on couches, leaning on one elbow as they ate, drank wine mixed with water, and engaged in conversation, poetry, and debate. Their ingenuity was not just intellectual, but mechanical. They invented the watermill and developed cranes capable of lifting heavy stones for their temples. Legend has it that the philosopher Plato created a kind of alarm clock using a water-based system that would whistle loudly at a set time, presumably to wake his students for early morning lectures. Another inventor, Categorize, refined the water clock to such a degree of accuracy that it remained the world's best timekeeping device for nearly 2,000 years. Perhaps the most astonishing piece of Greek technology ever discovered is the Antikythera mechanism. Found in a shipwreck in 1901, this device, from around 100 BCE, is a shoebox-sized contraption of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears. For decades, its purpose was a mystery, but modern scanning has revealed it to be a breathtakingly complex analog computer. By turning a handle, you could track the positions of the sun, moon, and the 5 known planets. It could predict eclipses and even showed the timing of the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. Nothing of its complexity would be seen again until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe, more than 1,000 years later. Even our image of the Greek world is a faded one. We picture their temples and statues as serene, white marble. But this is an illusion created by time. In their day, these statues were painted in bright, vibrant, almost garish colors. The Parthenon in Athens was a riot of red, blue, and gold. The serene white figures we see in museums are just the blank canvas left behind after centuries of wind and rain have washed the paint away. Imagine that world, a world of brilliant color, of fierce competition, of restless questioning. A world where bronze gears could map the heavens, and where philosophers debated the meaning of life in the shade of a brightly painted temple. Just breathe, and let the white marble of your thoughts be painted with the vibrant colors of this forgotten time. Section 5. The World of Rome. From the intellectual heights of Athens, we drift to the pragmatic, sprawling power of Rome. If the Greeks were the thinkers, the Romans were the doers. They were the engineers, the soldiers, the administrators who took Greek ideas and applied them on an unprecedented scale, building an empire that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia. The lifeblood of this empire was its incredible network of roads. Famously straight and built to last, these roads connected the farthest corners of the empire to its heart, allowing legions, goods, and ideas to move with unparalleled speed. Many modern roads in Europe are still built upon Roman foundations. Their engineering prowess was also on display in their aqueducts, massive channels that brought fresh water from distant mountains into the cities, supplying public fountains and, most importantly, the baths. The Roman bathhouse was not just a place to get clean. It was the center of social life. For a small fee, a Roman could spend the afternoon moving through a series of pools, from the hot caldarium to the warm tepidarium to the cold frigidarium. But there were also libraries, gardens, gyms, and food stalls. It was where you went to meet friends, conduct business, exercise, and relax. But hygiene was a very different concept. In the public toilets, there were no stalls. Romans would sit side by side on long stone benches, chatting as they went about their business. Instead of toilet paper, They used a shared sponge on a stick called a xylospongium, which was rinsed in a bucket of salt water or vinegar. These public toilets could also be surprisingly dangerous. Methane gas could build up in the sewers below, and creatures might crawl up from the pipes. It's thought that some Romans might have said a quiet prayer to Fortuna, the goddess of luck, before entering. Roman oral hygiene also had its peculiarities. One of the most effective cleaning agents they knew of was ammonia. A readily available source was stale urine, which was collected and sold for various purposes, including laundry. Some ancient sources even mention its use as a mouthwash to whiten teeth. The Roman day was structured differently. Many followed a rhythm that included a midday rest, or meridiatio. The workday often ended around noon, after which people would have their main meal and then perhaps take a nap, especially during hot summers. This tradition of a siesta would persist in Mediterranean cultures for centuries. Like the Greeks, wealthy Romans ate their meals while reclining on couches, and some of their culinary tastes might seem strange. The more exotic the dish, the more status it conferred. Flamingo tongues and stuffed dormice were considered delicacies. They also made a ubiquitous sauce called garum, a potent condiment made from fermented fish, intestines, and blood, used much like we use ketchup or soy sauce today. For entertainment, nothing could match the brutal spectacle of the gladiatorial games. Gladiators, who were usually slaves or criminals, were trained to fight to the death for the amusement of the crowds. But they were also celebrities. Their sweat was sometimes collected and sold as an aphrodisiac or face cream. And some people believed that drinking a gladiator's blood could cure epilepsy. It was a world of contradictions, of brilliant engineering and brutal entertainment, of sophisticated law and strange superstitions. Let the sounds of the bustling Roman street fade into a gentle hum. The clatter of sandals on stone, the murmur of the marketplace, the distant roar of the Colosseum. It all settles now into the quiet dust of history. Section 6. Sleep in Ages Past. Let's settle now on the quiet topic of sleep itself. How did our ancestors experience the night? In a world without electric light, the night was a different realm, darker, longer, and filled with different rhythms. For much of recent human history, especially in Europe, people may not have slept in one single block as we do. Historical records from the medieval period up to the 19th century are filled with references to a practice now known as segmented sleep. The pattern was this: people would go to bed not long after the sun went down. They would sleep for 3 to 4 hours in what was called the first sleep. Around midnight, they would wake up naturally. This period of wakefulness, known as the watch, would last for an hour or two. And it wasn't seen as a problem. It was a normal, expected part of the night. This was a time for quiet activity. People might stay in bed and pray, meditate, or talk with their spouse. They might get up to tend to the fire or do small chores. Medical texts from the period advised this was the best time for couples to conceive. After this waking period, they would go back to bed for their second sleep, which would last until dawn. This pattern is found in countless documents from early modern Europe, diaries, letters, plays. It was so common that it rarely needed explanation. We even find intriguing parallels in other times and places. The ancient Greek writer Plutarch mentioned some Egyptians taking a period of leisure between two sleeps. And a 16th century explorer noted that the Tupinamba people in Brazil would often wake after their first sleep to eat before returning to bed. So why did this experience disappear? The answer, most historians believe, is artificial light. The Industrial Revolution, gas lamps, and eventually the electric light bulb pushed back the darkness. Homes became brightly lit, allowing for work and socializing to continue late into the evening. Bedtimes were pushed later, and the night became compressed. That quiet, dark interval in the middle of the night was squeezed out of existence, until the memory of it faded almost completely. By the early 20th century, waking in the night was no longer seen as normal. but as a disorder. Sleep was also often a communal affair. Private bedrooms were a luxury. Most families in pre-modern Europe would sleep together in one room and often in one large bed, for warmth and to save space. It was a world with far less privacy than our own. As you lie here now, in your own private space, in a world illuminated by electricity, you can reflect on how profoundly our relationship with the night has changed. Waking in the middle of the night might not be a sign of a modern problem, but an echo of a much older, deeper rhythm. A whisper from a time when the night was longer, darker, and divided in two. Let that thought comfort you. If you find yourself awake in the quiet hours, know that you are in good historical company. You are simply observing the watch. Section 7. Curiosities from the Cabinet of History. The past is a cabinet filled with strange and wonderful curiosities. Objects and ideas that feel out of place, that challenge our assumptions about what life was like. Let's spend a little time now with a few of these forgotten oddities. Consider the high-heeled shoe. Today, we associate it almost exclusively with women's fashion, but its origins are surprisingly masculine. Persian cavalrymen in the 10th century wore heels on their boots to help secure their feet in the stirrups. This fashion was adopted by European aristocrats in the 17th century as a sign of virile, equestrian masculinity. For a time, both men and women of the upper classes wore high heels as a symbol of privilege. Only later did they become a uniquely feminine item. Or think of early medicine. Without a scientific understanding of germs, ancient healers relied on a mix of herbalism, observation, and magic. Anesthesia was a challenge. They used what they had. Alcohol and opium were common. But some remedies were far stranger. In Rome, as we've learned, some believed the blood of a fallen gladiator could cure ailments. In Egypt, crocodile dung was sometimes used in medical preparations, including as a form of contraceptive. It sounds repulsive, but it's possible the alkaline nature of the dung did have some spermicidal effect. Ancient Egypt also gives us what seems to be a surprisingly effective early pregnancy test. A woman who suspected she was pregnant would urinate on separate bags of wheat and barley seeds. If the wheat sprouted, it was thought to predict a girl. If the barley sprouted, a boy. If neither sprouted, she was not pregnant. While the gender prediction part was folklore, modern studies have shown that the estrogen in the urine of a pregnant woman can indeed stimulate seed growth, making the test accurate about 70% of the time. Even our most modern technologies have ancient precursors. We've talked about the Antikythera mechanism, the analog computer of ancient Greece. But the Greeks also had schematics for automatic doors. An inventor named Heron of Alexandria designed a system where lighting a fire on a hidden altar would heat air and water, creating pressure that, through a series of pulleys, would cause the temple doors to swing open as if by divine power. The Vikings, often stereotyped as savage raiders, were also expert navigators. It's believed they used a crystal they called a sunstone to find the sun's position on cloudy days. By holding the crystal, likely a piece of Iceland's spar, up to the sky and rotating it, they could find the direction of the sun through polarized light, allowing them to navigate the open ocean with incredible accuracy. And what about money? In ancient China, early forms of currency included cowrie shells and later, miniature bronze knives and spades. For the Aztecs, cacao beans were a valuable form of currency, used to buy goods in the marketplace. The world is so much older and stranger than we can imagine, full of echoes and inventions, lost and found. A Viking sailor staring at a cloudy sky through a crystal. A Greek priest lighting a fire to make a temple's doors swing open. A Roman aristocrat complaining about the quality of his copper. Let these strange, true stories be the last thoughts that drift through your mind, like curious artifacts on a dusty shelf, as you slide deeper and deeper into rest. The stream of time flows on. We have journeyed far tonight, from the first temple on a Turkish hilltop to the bustling streets of Rome, from the spiritual sleep of the pharaohs to the divided night of our ancestors. We have seen that history is not one single block of the past. It is a vast, layered, and endlessly surprising landscape. Cleopatra and the pyramids are separated by an ocean of time. The last mammoths were contemporaries of the first pharaohs. The foundations of our modern timekeeping were laid in Babylon. The things we think of as modern, computers, automatic doors, pregnancy tests, have faint, ghostly echoes in the ancient world. The people of the past were not so different from us. They loved their children, told jokes, complained about bad customer service, and gazed at the same moon and stars in wonder. They sought meaning, connection, and a way to make their mark on the world. There is nothing more you need to learn tonight, nothing to hold on to. Let these facts and stories dissolve, like sugar in water, becoming part of a sweet, dreamless quiet. Let the weight of these thousands of years be a comforting blanket, a reminder of the deep, slow, and unending continuity of human experience. The world will keep turning. History will keep unfolding. But for now, for tonight, there is only stillness. There is only peace. There is only sleep. Good night.